train who we need. Strategic disruption, counter-attacks, not just in the battlefield, but in economy, diplomacy, and information warfare. Civic, militarization. Every citizen is a guardian, not through violence, but through vigilance, memory, and readiness. Russian advisors helped not just with tactics, but rewrote military training manuals, restructured strategic thinking, and began building a new kind of Burkina Faso army. One thought thinks before it shoots and defends more ethnic territory. It defends identity. Across the Sahel, murals began attached, no longer just honoring fallen Burkina soldiers, but also those from Mali and Niger depicted standing together under one flag, red, gold, black, the new flag of resistance. And with each image, one word echoes louder, unity. What the world witnessed wasn't simply a response to a deadly ambush, it was the ignition of something deeper. A continent no longer asking for help, but declaring its will to survive. Traorés' rotation isn't a single strike, it's a doctrine, a movement, and it's just beginning. From mourning to mobilization. In most nations, the death of 50 soldiers would trigger mourning, maybe protest, followed by silence. Burkina Faso. Grief has become infrastructure, pain has become policy, and what started as a military tragedy has now reshaped the entire civilian-state relationship. Across cities and countryside, the state is no longer seen as a distant institution. It is now a living organism, one that breathes through its people. In marketplaces, once filled only with trade and chatter, bulletin boards now host defense shadles. In mosques and churches, Basarman topics have shifted less about salvation, more about sovereignty. Local elders once respected for their age now influence for something else. Strategic knowledge. Neighborhoods have formed civilian watch units, unarmed, unpaid, and highly organized. They track strange movements, they repertoire familiar vehicles, they rehearse evacuation routes and defense positions with a precision that used to belong only to soldiers. One village near Theberdar of Niger has even developed a system of coded drum beats, an ancient practice revived for modern defense. Meanwhile, inside Burkina Faso's education system, change has accelerated. Schools no longer teach only arithmetic and language. They now include civic sovereignty, education, why African borders were drawn, what foreign debt really means, how media narratives air-shaped and sold. Students as young as 10 can now identify NATO bases on a map. At 14, they debate the pros and cons of alignment. By 16, they write essays not just on the history of colonization, but on the future of Pan-Africanism. This isn't indoctrination. This is self-defense through awareness. President Ibrahim Traoré calls it mental radicalization, and the results polls taken by independent journalists show a record-breaking 87% public approval for the government's military and civilian coordination. In a region where coups, corruption, and collapse have often been the norm, Burkina Faso now feels organized. But this rising unity has come with significant political consequences. Traoré's government has taken bold steps on considered untouchable suspension of foreign NGO operations that cannot prove financial transparency, review of all foreign infrastructure contracts, particularly in mining and telecom. Nationalization of key industries, especially those related to energy and defense supply chains. The most symbolic move came quietly, but sent shockwaves through the halls of global diplomacy. Traoré ordered a full audit of Burkina Faso's central banking relationships, including agreements tied to the CFA. For decades, this currency system has tethered West African economies' tough French treasury. Now that tether is being cut, working with Mali and Niger, Burkina Faso has formally proposed an original currency, backed not by euros but by gold reserves and local production output. Inside government circles, they call it the Sahel Standard. If successful, it would mark first post-colonial currency in Francophone West Africa, free from French oversight. But perhaps the most radical shift isn't economic, it's psychological. Citizens no longer view politics as a spectator sport. In town hall meetings, they don't ask, "What will the president do?" They ask, "What role will I play?" Traoré's cabinet, once filled with party elites, now include aspirants, teachers, community, and engineers. Appointments are no longer based on party loyalty, but on service record and community. This transformation has sparked something rare in African politics: trust. Not blind loyalty, but active bearer trust built on actions, not promises. A woman in Dori interviewed by an independent Pan-African outlet put it this way: "We don't follow Traoré because he's strong. We follow him because he's among us. He didn't bring change from above, he pulled it out of us." This collective empowerment is changing how opposition works too. In the past, dissent often came from foreign-funded think tanks or disconnected parties. Today, the loudest critics come from within. From youth groups demanding faster reforms, from women's cooperatives requesting more, say, in-border defense, from artists pushing for media independence, and Traoré doesn't silence them. He invites them in. This is no longer a government for the people. It is increasingly a government, the people. But such change does not come without risk. Western institutions are watching closely. Some see a Mavekik, Others see a threat. International grants are quietly suspended. French media outlets run daily stories questioning Traoré's mental health leadership and intentions. Calls for sanctions have begun to surface in European parliaments. Inside Burkina Faso, however, none of this seems to matter because for the first time in living memory, Burkina citizens are not waiting to be saved. They are rebuilding the future themselves with hands that farm and defend, with minds that question and organize, and with a spirit that refuses to kneel. The world watches and worries. In Washington, the tone has shifted. What once was described as Burkina Faso's youthful leadership experiment is now labeled a potential source of regional. Behind closed doors, think tanks scrambled to analyze what they are calling the Sahel realignment. Policy briefings warn that Ibrahim Traoré's doctrine of self-reliance could inspire either African nations to reject foreign military aid, challenge current tendencies, and even question the legitimacy of global institutions like both IMF, World Bank, and NATO. White House aides reportedly urged African envoys to reopen dialogue with Burkina Faso, but without guarantees of sanctions being off the table. In a recent closed-door meeting, a U.S. diplomat was quoted saying Burkina Faso may become the next Cuba of Africa. At the United Nations, silence echoes louder than statements. While Russia openly praises Burkina Faso's sovereignty moves and frames Traoré as a symbol of anti-imperialist resistance, Western powers are far more cautious. The African Union's muted response to the attack on Burkina soldiers has sparked outrage online. Hashtags like Dindano, Speak Up and Wings Afriquith. Traoré trend across social media, especially among young Africans who feel abandoned by continental institutions. Meanwhile, French media has gone on the offensive. Daily editorials criticize youth alliances and lack of democratic structure, while avoiding thought depper question why are millions of Africans standing behind him. European lawmakers have begun floating the idea of soft sanctions, trade reviews, travel restrictions, and strategic aid spend, but none of these seem to sway the narrative on the ground. In Africa, because while Western capitals whisper about destabilization, many in the global South see something else entirely. A model. Observers in Latin America, Southeast Asia, and even parts of Eastern Europe are watching Burkina Faso's transformation closely. What happens when a small underrepresented begins to fight narrative warfare with national pride, digital resilience, and regional cooperation? China has responded with its characteristic criticism. Official statements remain vague, but behind the scenes, Chinese diplomats have initiated discreet talks with Burkina Faso to explore potential infrastructure partnerships. This time with more favorable terms and local ownership. It's becoming increasingly likely is not simply reacting to violence. He is resetting the rules of engagement, economically, militarily, and as he does, when unspoken fear is beginning to circulate here at the halls of global power. What if he succeeds? The red line has been drawn. There are moments in history when a single act of violence is meant to break a nation, but in Burkina Faso, it did the opposite. 50 soldiers were lost, yes, but something deeper was found. A collective will, a national spine, a red line, across dusty airfields and quiet villages. People no longer speak off ear, they speak of readiness, and that readiness is no longer measured in bullets and drones, but in memory, discipline, and unity. Traoré's rotation is not a declaration of war, it is a declaration of independence, from foreign dependency. From forced narratives, from the quiet colonization that never truly ended. And that's precisely why global powers are worried. Not because Burkina Faso is threatening them militarily, but because it is proving that Africa can stand on its own. The danger now, however, is escalation. If history has taught you anything, it's that when a small nation asserts its dignity too loudly, empires start sharpening their tools. Sanctions, propaganda regime, change operations. It begins with labels like radical, unstable, authoritarian. Then comes the isolation and finally the attempt to erase the example before it spreads. So let us be clear, this is not just about one country. This is about a continent-wide awakening and whether it will be nurtured or crushed as citizens of the world, especially those of us in